So first step is peeling. We're gonna use this Tigwin peeler that we got. You can get it on Amazon for I think 17 bucks. I'm so mad that I never had this for the years that I would peel and core apples for pies. But yeah, 17 bucks on Amazon, I'm pretty sure. Goes through. I don't use peels on my applesauce, so for this it does a great job. But you're literally just gonna line them up, take the cores, take the peels. Midwesterners use ice cream buckets for everything. So here's one more use. That is our peel bucket. Those are gonna go to the cows, and some of them will actually be used for apple cider vinegar. We'll do that in another video, but you're just gonna go through and core and peel. You can do applesauce with the peels on. It really just kind of varies by person. We usually don't do the peels on the applesauce. We might do a couple batches, but it does a great job, and it doesn't take too much of the actual apple away. It really does a good job of just getting the skins and just kind of getting the core without too much waste of the apple. So you're just going to go through and you're going to cut. Sometimes you're going to find some pieces or parts that you don't really want in. So in this case, there's just like a little bit of I'd say an insect hole. So we're going to take that, we're going to toss that, and then we're going to take the rest and put it in. Because it's peeled and cored, it's so easy to just go in and start cutting through. And when you're baking, if you were to use this for baking versus applesauce, you'd want to be a lot more intentional about making sure all that the pieces are the same size so that they're baked thoroughly the same way. But in this case, it's not as important because they're all going to go to applesauce. So as long as they're somewhat chunked up, you're good to go, because you're going to use the immersion blender anyway to make sure they're all good. Here's another piece of apple that, probably don't want that in the applesauce, so we're going to cut that out. I hate food waste, so we're going to take away the part that isn't touching any of the bad. These are good. Throw that away. Put that in the crock pot. And we've been doing this a lot throughout the, late summer, early fall. We've had so many apples. We've made apple crisp, apple butter, apple sauce, apple pie filling, just eating raw apples. And every time we do this, every bit of this is used in some form or capacity. Okay, so we have 4 different crock pots going. These are gonna sit on high for a couple of hours. Depending on the consistency of the applesauce that you want, you might not even have to use an immersion blender. If you want a chunkier applesauce, you can just use a spoon to break down some of the mushier apples and then work towards filling your jars. If you want more of like a puree type consistency, you wait until this gets really mushy and then you use your immersion blender. But when you're looking at a busy day of canning, set it and forget it is the way to go. So this is about the easiest way you can make applesauce. There's no sugar, no anything. You literally chunk up the apples, put them into the crock pot on high, and that is it. We have a mixture of Honeycrisp and Braeburn apples in this, and that seems to be the perfect mixture for having like a sweet applesauce, but also a little bit of tartness to it. If you want to add cinnamon or sugar, you can, but we want to make this kind of as healthy and plain as possible. And then if you do use a plain applesauce, you can put it into other recipes, like I make an applesauce muffin. So it's kind of nice to make sure that it's just plain applesauce so it goes with anything you want. But these are going to sit, and then we'll follow back up with you when we are filling jars. Getting about where we want it to be, but my jars aren't ready for it to go in, and I don't want to start ladling anything into the jars until all of them are done. So I'm going to put this one on low. We still need it to be warm, because if you put cold applesauce or cold anything into warm jars that then go into warm water, the jars can break. So this needs to stay warm, but I'm not even going to use the immersion blender on this. This is about the consistency that we want. I know last time we used the immersion blender because we were making apple puree, more of like a baby food type consistency for a friend that was gonna have a baby. But this is kind of the consistency that I would say is more typical for applesauce. So we're not gonna even immersion blend that. So we'll put that on low and let that just simmer while we wait for the others to get further along, and then we will end up ladling into the jars. So these are pretty much ready to go. All 4 of the crock pots are ready to go. I am gonna immersion blend this just a little bit because it's cooked down, but it's still kind of chunky. So I'm gonna use the immersion blender on this for just a little bit, and then we're gonna be ready to use the jars. the other ones and we'll be ready to use the jars. Okay, so the applesauce is done, the jars are sterilized, the lids are sterilized, and we're ready to actually start the canning process. So we're gonna take a ladle, we're gonna take our funnel, and this is our chunkier version of the applesauce. So we didn't use the immersion blender on this one. I usually don't like it too chunky, but everybody has different preferences. So we did a smaller batch of the chunky applesauce, and then I would say the other ones are more of like a mix between a puree and an applesauce, and then we're gonna do some in the next batch that's more of a puree. We'll probably end up giving it to family members that we have that all seem to have young babies. So we're gonna fill this up, and you'll be amazed, it does take quite a few apples to actually fill these jars. However, this is a big jar. I mean, it's gonna take a while to get through this applesauce. So we're gonna fill it about to that level. I won't show doing all of them yet, but we're going to take this tool. It's nice because it serves two purposes. So one, we're going to use it to push out any air bubbles because we don't want air pockets trapped in there when we're canning. So we're just kind of going to go around the jar. And then once that part of this is complete, we're going to use this other end, which has markings and measurements. And each recipe will kind of call for a different distance from the top of the jar, but I'm using about a 1/2 inch. So we're going to use about a 1/2 inch. Just make sure that it's not surpassing that so it doesn't bubble up and spill over when we actually are canning. But this is what it looks like at this point. And then the next step with all of these jars is going to be, after they're filled, to grab a clean paper towel or rag that has white vinegar on it and wipe off the top. You want to make sure you do a good job of that. That will help to make sure, one, that there's no food on top that's going to make it sticky, but also it's going to help to seal with the lids before you put it in the boiler. Then we grab a lid, make sure those are sterilized, stick it on, grab your ring. You're going to put it about fingertip tight, so you should be able to unscrew it with your fingertips without a lot of stress. And then you're ready to put this in the canner. So we've got everything in the jars, we've got lids on, we've got rings on. This is not a rolling boil, so the lid has been off, so the water's cooled down a little bit. So we're not going to start our timer until this gets to a rolling boil. This is very hot water, but you should see a lot of bubble that roll. There's no other way to put it. So once that hits, then we're going to start the timer for 15 minutes, and then we'll be ready to take these out. Okay, so the timer just went off. It's a good rolling boil. You're gonna see it slow down here. So I'm gonna grab these out. That was about 15 minutes at that rolling boil. So we're gonna take our tool, wrong way. Get all the excess water off of the top that we can, and then bring it over to a surface that is not going to be bugged by the temp, because these are really hot when they come out. So you want to make sure that you're not putting it on like a laminate countertop like what we have. Bring it on the board. We'll pull all of these off, and then we're going to kind of wait to hear the pop. The pop is the seal, and it can take hours. I mean, they say if you don't have you might have just heard that. That's actually a seal. So as you pull these out, the pop in the seal comes from a change in pressure within the can as it changes the temperature around or outside of the can. So it can take a little bit as these kind of cool and change the temp, but sometimes they do pop right away. And then after so many hours, we're gonna take the rings off, and if there is a good seal, we should be able to pick it up from just the lid itself with no ring on. Okay, so applesauce is done. This is what we got from it. Now these are pretty big jars. You kind of underestimate how big these jars are when you're trying to get through a jar of applesauce after you've broken the seal. But it also takes a lot of apples to get to this point, especially if you're not using peels. I've started by getting all the rings off these. So these all came out of the canner late last night, probably about 10 p.m. It's 11 a.m. the next day, so they've all cooled. They've had time to have a good seal. We figured all of these would have a really good seal because we heard them popping. almost as soon as they came out of the canner. So like the apple butter, it was a really good seal. But the test is you should be able to take the ring off and pick it up by just your fingertips and just the lid all by itself. We do not store with the rings on, because if you store with the ring on and the seal pops and it breaks and you take the lid off, you might not know that your seal is popped. And especially considering sometimes these things sit on shelves for years, you get sick pretty easily of eating something that hasn't been sealed. So we do not store with the rings on, but that's why it's important to have these good seals. Get these removed. I've got a couple here yet I have to do, but we wanted to show you one that did come unsealed. Now, full disclosure, I actually do think that this one was sealed when it came out of the canner, but this is a little bit of an older ring and I struggled to get it off. So when I struggled to get the ring off, I had to twist really hard, and I think that that's what popped the seal. So I don't have any concerns about this one having been sealed, but since now it's no longer sealed, unless we want to go back to the process of canning it again, which I do not, this one's just going to go in the fridge. We can eat this one throughout the week and put it in the fridge. So that one's going to go off to the side, but pretty good ratio if we only have one so far that hasn't sealed. I'm going to go through the rest of these and kind of show you what that process looks like. So we're going to take the jar, unscrew the lid, put it to the side, grab by the tap, just fingertips. Should be able to shake it like that. Shouldn't come unsealed. That's a really good seal. Fingertip test. And you can see at the top of these jars, there's no rise. So, kind of even like what you have at the grocery store, you'll see the writing that says, if tab is popped, do not eat. That means there's no good seal. Same thing here. So if I were doing this and I could push that tab down, you'd have concerns. But because of that, or because we're not able to do that, it's good. And frankly, none of these had the tab up. So you hope that means that there's a good seal, but you do not know until you do this. So far, so good on all these little ones. And sometimes they're filled maybe just a little too high, so some comes over. So I'm gonna have to wipe this one down because there's some applesauce on the side, some applesauce on the ring. So I always have a rag nearby so that we can do that. I'll get that with a wet rag here in a little bit. But it obviously still has a really good seal, so no concerns there. And you're gonna see there is some color difference in the applesauce for a couple of reasons. One, some of these spent a little bit longer in the crock pot than others, depending on how smooth we wanted them baked down. So none of them have anything in them. No cinnamon, no sugar, nothing. My sister and her boyfriend were over last night, and they were trying the applesauce, and there's nothing in here. There's nothing in here. Oh, there we go. Live for you. So same thing. This is an older ring. We're gonna be tossing these rings. These are actually a little bit older ball jars that we got from Boone's grandma. So the rings, we couldn't really find another ring that would go on them, and these rings were struggling. So I figured that would be the case. If it's hard to get a ring on, it's probably gonna be hard to get it off, which can pop that seal. So these two are gonna have to go to the fridge. It's not a wasted product by any means. We can still eat it, but they are definitely not gonna be shelf stable. So lesson learned, we're gonna get rid of those rings. We were doing this last night at 11 p.m., so I was not about to put it in a new jar. But back to kind of my other point, there's nothing in these, and besides apples that are cooked. And my sister was like, I can't believe that. That's crazy. It tastes that good and it's that sweet. If you start with a good product or a good apple, you don't need to fill it with flavoring. A lot of times at the grocery store, they're using the cheapest apple they can find. They're using older apples. This is fresh from the tree, really good apples, so you don't need to flavor with extra sugar, extra flavoring. So this is ready to go in the pantry. We're gonna store them without the lids off. We're gonna label them with the date that they were canned as well as what the product is, and then put them on the shelf according to the oldest product on the front, so we know what to kind of eat first. But we'll also be giving these to some friends and family, kind of as a little gift from off our tree. So with that, we'll put these in the fridge, we'll put these in the pantry, and hopefully start enjoying them soon.